Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expat Coffee Break. My name is Javier and I am your host. This is a podcast dedicated to sharing personal experiences of immigrants and telling their stories of what it's like to move to a new country. This time, it is me in talking with myself. So I'm going to be reviewing, as I've talked before, I've joined a community on Reddit called Expats. And I like participating in some posts in there. I like seeing the opinions from other people, the experiences from other people living abroad. And this time I want to cover some interesting posts that I saw recently. And I want to talk about what I think about the question that they posted and talk about some of the other answers that other people might have given and how that relates to my experience. Let me know what you think about this type of format. I'm experimenting, of course. If it's something you want to have more often, that's something I can consider. And if it's something you despise, also let me know. So, without that, let's begin with one of the first questions that I saw on the expats community that I thought it was interesting. And that's about living abroad and working remotely. So this is that's what the title of this question on the community is: living abroad and working remotely. The user is Midsummer's Evening, and it's a question about, well, employment. And here it goes. He starts with, are any of you U.S. citizens who live abroad and work remotely for U.S. companies? If so, what is your agreement like with your employer? Are you a full-time employee or a contractor? I am okay, so he's asking if you're a U.S. citizen working abroad for a U.S. company. Okay, got it. Sorry, I'm reading through this, and as you might have figured, English is not my first language, and I trying to do a podcast at the same time and reading this, it's odd. So I want to make sure I understood the question and I make it clear in the podcast. Anyway, so he asked the question about what I just said, as he's saying he's a full-time employee at a mid-sized company in the US that doesn't have a presence outside of the US. I would like to approach my company about moving to Mexico, but I have been reading that this will cause them to have to handle payroll taxes in Mexico and potentially subject them to income taxes in Mexico. Has anyone does this or have thoughts on what arrangement might work best and or how likely I am to be successful? Thanks. And he posted some of the sources that he reviewed. I haven't clicked through them. So the first thing I want to say myself is I thought about this because of, the pandemic, of course, and with everybody working remote, I'm sure that was something that it crossed everybody's minds. Mexico and the US are so close to each other, and I'm Mexican, and it should be able to just go home and work from there, right? I thought about doing that initially when the pandemic started. Nobody knew exactly how long it'll last. In retrospective, it would have been great because it lasted for so long that I could have just extended my stay. However, because of the borders were closed for so long and people were not able to travel back to the US, in this case, if I would have traveled back, then I would have stayed stuck in the US, in Mexico, without being able to come back to the US with basically all of my stuff and an apartment rent in the US. And not only that would have been very expensive because I would have been paying for a lifestyle in the US without being in the US, I will also have a lot of trouble with my taxes and my employer. And I say this because I know that's one of the questions he's asking, and he's saying that the company might be subject to paying taxes in Mexico, and well, he's asking if this is going to be likely to be successful. You wouldn't be not only you will be subject to some taxes in Mexico, the US will also have some. You will not be able to do your taxes in the US as a resident if you stay longer than, if you're less than 180 days in the US, I believe, you're not able to file your taxes as a resident, and that's going to be a different category, and it's going to be a nightmare, I think. I haven't done it, of course. And maybe the company that you're working for, in this case, my company, I know for a fact they will not be happy at all to be in that situation, because there are a bunch of legal things and risk involved with having an employee registered in one country and working in another. They don't like that at all. They don't even like having an employee from like being registered in this case, Minnesota, and working in another state. They don't even like that. And that's most likely for tax purposes, but they can do it. Nevertheless, from a different country, that's a big no-no. And the reason I know it for a fact is after a year going into the pandemic in this 2021, the company I work for came out with a new policy that says, all right, everybody we're working remote and you guys would like to work abroad, but for XYZ reasons that I don't want to go into details, because I don't know if it's the same for all companies or just the one I'm working for, and I don't want to expose confidential information or anything, so I'm just going to do generalities. For X, Y, and Z reason, we are going to have this policy that if you want to work abroad, it has to be approved by your manager and reviewed by HR and legal, blah, blah, blah. Not only that, you are capped to not more than 30 days work, and you're capped to not more than 90 days vacation, work, and unpaid vacation on paid time. So you cannot stay more than 90 days abroad. And this kind of aligns with the American laws, with the tax laws, that you cannot file taxes as a resident if you're longer than X amount of days. And also because you're in a work visa and things like that, it makes things very complicated for the company and yourself being abroad as an employee. That's my experience. And I want to talk about some of the comments that I saw in the subreddit, in the question that user Midsummer's Evening posted. So the top comment says, "I've done it, but it didn't work out well for my employer, who eventually got into hot water with the IRS for 1099 misclassification. Unfortunately, federal and international tax laws have not yet catch up with digital nomads and the realities of modern remote work. Frankly, I don't know if there's an above board way to pull this off. I don't know what he meant with that. But yeah, that's kind of aligned with my experience of the things that I've been told by my company. It's pretty hard to do that as an employee. Now, if you're a contractor, if you are your own company, if you can just build a company and they're willing to pay you as a contractor, I think that will be a different story. But I mean, that's not the case. That's not my case, and maybe other people are. Let me see if somebody has. I think somebody talked about that in this subreddit. Somebody mentioned that this is from. Oh, sorry. By the way, I want to give credit to the top comment of this subreddit. It said the user is Big Hark. That's the top comment. Should be easy to find if you want to look at this in the expat community. The next comment I want to talk about is from user Abraster. She says, this person says, wife did just this recently. Okay, so they moved from the US to the UK, US to the United Kingdom. Company has no presence in the UK, and they used remote.com for the employment structure, where remote.com is the umbrella contracting company and wife is their employee. They just have to work out her new salary okay. So sounds like there's a company that does this type of outsourcing, I guess, like remote outsourcing. but they had to do a bit of a salary adjustment to offset the cost of the umbrella company. This is not a paid advertisement for remote.com, but sounds like if your company is willing to do that with your employment arrangement, will be worth exploring, I guess. I don't want to talk about this topic too much because what I read about in that Reddit, there's a lot of, you can do it. It's a big deal if you shouldn't be working remote, blah, blah, blah. Instead, now I want to talk about another question somebody else posted in the expat community. This one is from user dark_Negan, Negan. And his question is, anyone move to the US with an L1 visa? And it's a visa specific. I highlighted this one specifically because I just recorded an episode about my experience with a visa. And this one, his question is, hello, I'm currently a student living in France, and I would like to find a company willing to sponsor a visa to work in the US, New York City to be specific. But I've heard it's really hard, and I've heard it's really hard if it's your first job experience, and the easiest solution will be to find a company in my country who will be willing to do an intra-company transfer and sponsor an L1 visa. Has anyone here done this? I would love to have real experiences on this. I really don't know how hard it is to do. All right, so first of all, in my experience, it is possible. I mean, I did it, but it is not as easy as it sounds like. Yeah, you just get a job, and after that, the company might be willing to sponsor a visa. And if you're in Europe, trying to move to New York City from the US, and if you're in Europe, in my experience, it might be a little bit more complicated unless you're already working in that company for quite some time. The company, it's a European company that wants you to get international experience overseas, in this case from Europe to Americas. I'm saying Americas because it could be Mexico, Canada, or anywhere in South America. They want you to get international experience outside of Europe, and then they want you to come back. Or maybe you're a manager and they want somebody from Europe because of the culture. It might be easier for you to relate to them. I don't know. But it is not as easy to just, let's get a job, and after a year or so, I'm going to get a visa and be able to work in the US. In my case, I worked for the same company for over 7 years, and it wasn't just like, we want you to move to the US and work for us. It was more of there was a position that I was a good candidate, and they had to go through the process to get interviews and everything with internal and external candidates. And after they had basically extinguished all of their options, then they were able to say, we're going to go forward with a visa. So it wasn't easy, and it's not just as direct to say, you're a good guy, we want you here. It's not like that, at least in my experience. And if you're from Europe, man, I think, I don't know, man, lady, I don't know. Sorry. I will think it's a guy because of his name, Negan. That's the Negan, that's the name from a series from The Walking Dead. It was a guy. Anyway, if you're in Europe, I think there are better opportunities over there. If you're starting out, at least, you should be able to find a job in your own country and maybe move to another European country. I think the visa process will be easier as well because of the Europe Union and how that works. I'm not an expert, but I've heard that it's easier. So let's read some of the comments in this question. And so the first answer is from Siggy is 2020. So it's a little bit complicated. It's spelled Ziggiz 2020. Ziggy is 2020. And the answer is, I think you need to be employed in your home country for at least 1 year before you can get an intra-company transfer L1. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Not only is not as easy, but for you to get a L1 visa, you have to be working for that company for at least a year. So it's not as direct. Other than, I mean, minimum 1 year, they also really want to have you work for them. We'll continuing with the answer. And the employer, your immigration lawyer, actually. Oh, okay. And the employer, and then with brackets, your immigration lawyer actually has to make up an original and compelling story why the related U.S. entity needs you in the U.S. So that's aligned with what I said in my previous episode. Well, not a previous episode, but the last time I talked about my visa experience. The company, other than getting all the legal documents, they have to come up with a letter of why you're the guy, why you are the person that is going to get the job. Continuing with the answer, it isn't a sure thing. There's around a 20% refusal rate. Wow, I didn't know it was so big. 20% refusal rate. I've never done it personally, but before I retired, I was a lawyer for a global humanitarian organization that often brought up international staff to the U.S. using L1. Okay, so this guy doesn't have immigrant experience, but he was a lawyer working for a company doing that, or an organization bringing people with a L1 visa. And then he says there was always a fair amount of drama involved, plus dozens of dozens of dollars in legal fees. Yeah, I've heard it's expensive. It's not something they do if they're not a big company. The employer has to be really committed to jumping through all of the hoops, not just doing it for the employee's convenience. Yeah, that's aligned with my experience and the people I talked with when I tell them that I'm on an L1 visa and that they pay for my relocation and such. They're impressed with it, and especially people that have work experience in the U.S. They're usually in a managerial position in a large corporate office. They are impressed and say, "Wow, that company must really like you. They must really like your talent." So it's not an easy thing to do, and that's along with my experience. It's not like I'm saying, "Oh yeah, I'm the man. I'm great." It's just I'm just telling you the reality of how these type of work visas work. All right, so I went through all of the answers, in this question, and most of the answers that I found are aligned with the first thing that I said, which is basically it's not as easy, it's not as direct, and basically the company has to be willing to blah, 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 more than 1 year, blah, 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 blah. There's just one answer that says from user Sushi rice only. It's all together. So he's saying that moved from Singapore to the United States to New York City on an L1 visa. Had been working for a large multinational for 1.5 years before I got the offer in New York City. Was a completely different department, however, so it wasn't as second-meant. It's just that with the possibility to move on an L1 instead or the regular H1B, I guess the New York office was more willing to hire me. I didn't apply formally. I worked with the New York office and after a few interviews, they gave me the offer and began the paperwork. Right, so Sushi Only Rice seems to be was a very lucky case and a very bold person that contacted the company in an event in Singapore. So that this person has a background in business, financial services, and accounting degree, and he just contacted the New York company, and he was able to do the transfer. I don't want to go into detail because, this was a one-off based on the answers given by the other users, and I want to talk about other interesting topics that I saw on Reddit. So this one is more of a personal level, I think. It talks about employment, but I find it very personal, very relatable in my experience. So this question is from lazy_marketing3255. Question is, people on employment dependent visas, how do you handle the pressure? So I guess employment dependent visas talks about L1s or H visas. And so his story goes like this. I've just moved from UK to the US on a L1 visa. I don't love my job. I do it for the money and for opportunities like this. That's a tough one. I kind of relate to it, but I'm going to get to that in a second. Since getting here, there have been some rocky moments at work, conflict, problems, which are probably just bumps in the road, and as it has never been smooth sailing in my current role. However, I am now in a foreign country, spending lots of money, buying furniture, etc. And for the first time, I have a spouse depending on me for stability and for the opportunity to also work and get something out of this experience when the work permit comes through. Basically, I am feeling the pressure. We just bought a couch, and I literally think I might have to leave this behind in 6 months when I quit or get fired. Every time I sit on it, every time he or she sits on it, starts thinking about getting rid of it because it might have to get fired or quit. I keep having thoughts about where we should go next. Losing the option of switching employers if a job goes south has really affected how I see work, even though I have never needed that option in the past. Interesting. I completely understand this person because, again, I'm going to talk about this in a bit. My fellow immigrant workers, how do you handle this feeling? Is it time for me to just start meditating and meditating and living for the moment? P.S. I would like to acknowledge my privilege and that I'm lucky to have this problem. So Lacy_marketing 3255. Just to talk about the comment that you mentioned about you're lucky to have this problem because you have this privilege. First of all, without getting too philosophical about it, everybody's problems are as important as they are to you as it is to anybody else, irrelevant of the magnitude of the problem, because to you this is a big problem, even though in comparison to somebody dealing with something else, it might not be. But anyway, I relate to it heavily because, well, I also immigrated to the US with an L1 visa from Mexico to the US. Even though it's not what is considered a first world country, the UK, Mexico is considered more like a development country. I don't see it that way. But the numbers, the economy, and some other numbers might differ. But in my opinion, Mexico is a great country, and I would love to go back to my country, which is something that I talk with my employer, and we're looking for the opportunity for me to go back whenever possible. Therefore, having said all that, I also feel the pressure for sure because, well, my spouse also depends on me for security, for income, and I moved with a lot of my stuff to the US, but I also bought a lot of stuff in the US, and I get the same thoughts, thinking, why do I want a big bookcase? I might have to get rid of it when I go back. Why do I need this many? Why do I need a new desktop? Why do I need a new podcast microphone if I'm going to have to get rid of it if I ever want to go back, if things go south, and then I have to get rid of it and go just with my suitcase and go back to Mexico with just my clothes? Yeah, I tend to have those thoughts, and I definitely feel that now that I don't have the option to just go and find another job, I find it to be more stressful and have more pressure to excel at my work. Because, if they don't like me, they might just be able to say, okay, good luck, Javier. Go find something else back in your country. We're done with you. And also, I also have this kind of pressure to say, well, I have to contain myself. I cannot, if I don't like the situation, I find it really hard because I basically removed my options. So I don't have an option to say, if I don't like it here, if there's a lot of stress, a lot of work, or too toxic, whatever, I can just find another job. Well, in my case, I cannot. I have to suck it up, do my best, and maybe it'll pass. And it really changes your perspective. In one way, I feel that I learned a lot of things. I learned to deal with frustration. I learned to be better at my job, at being more professional. But I'm also being very stressed. I mean, it's very stressful. There's a lot of pressure because I cannot afford to fail. I cannot afford to not be that support for my wife, because she had to quit her career back in Mexico so that we could start all over in the US. And it has been very hard for her because, well, I moved with a job offer and a very good job with my career. She had to leave career-wise all of that behind and start all over. And it is more complicated for her because she doesn't have a US degree. And so if she wants to go to a company and apply for, she's an accountant, by the way, and she wants to apply as an accountant, she has to get a degree in a US university, which will take around 2 years to get done. And I don't know how many US dollars to get done. So instead, she decided to just start waiting tables, working in fast food, working at restaurant chains. Started with a part-time job, just making minimum wage. Now she's waitressing and making money off tips. It's complicated. It's very complicated. There's a lot of pressure. My wife's still not very happy with the situation. She would prefer to having her career, but it's kind of just complicated. So without going into more details, I want to talk about other answers in the same subreddit. This top comment, it's from Rethinking for Myself. User says, expat living requires more planning and pragmatism. You have to frequently do the calculus about things like your couch and be prepared to sell it or even give it away if the time comes. This gives you more control and peace of mind. This gives you more control. Okay, yeah. So basically saying that planning and being pragmatic about stuff like the property you have will give you peace of mind if you're willing to sell everything. I agree with that because in my case, I didn't buy an expensive vehicle. I just bought a used car that was still in good condition, reliable. I paid cash for it. I don't have a credit. My insurance is cheap. If I want to just sell it, I'll sell it right away because the market value for that car, it's good enough. I wouldn't be losing a lot of money. So I made those type of conscious decisions with things that I bought or things that I might be able to take with me back home if I have to. Coming back to the answer from Rethinking for Myself, he or she says, on the upside, you get new stuff more often and get the chance to try different household things more often. You don't fall in love with your things as much and start to see most of it more like tools for life. Well, yeah, but it's a little bit frustrating to start all over. Speaking about it personally, moving to the US was the first time I moved internationally, but I've been moving for work since I was 18. I've been moving since I started college. So I have been getting rid of things and getting new things since I was a wee lad. I was 18 years old, and so it gets old. You know, you get tired of getting rid of things and having to start all over again and meeting new people. And I mean, it's always fun to meet new people, but having to start all over and just not being able to connect with people sometimes, it's hard. It's a bit new and hard at first, at least for me, coming to Rethinking for Myself answer. It's a bit new and hard at first, at least for me. The basic plan before was to buy a couch and plan to replace it sometime in the dim future, after it was worn out. There really was no plan, and things happened like This is my this is my favorite chair. When it was beyond smelly and ugly and didn't match anything. You can fit a couch and yeah, they're just talking about property. So I want to move on to the next answer. I mean, it was an interesting answer. I just didn't want it to continue on it because it's just talking about buying and getting rid of things. I would like to explore more about the feeling of living like that, just like I talk about the work experience. All right, so this is a good one. This is one from Weird Uncle Scabby. And it says, I've lived in Hong Kong and now in Australia because of my partner's job. We're currently stressing ourselves out planning an unanticipated move back to the US because of the seemingly indefinite lockdowns and international border closure here. It's all pretty fucked because we just got the paperwork from our company for them to apply for permanent residency for us, something we had wanted to get when we first moved here, or to renew our temporary visas for another 4 years. Instead, we are trying to figure out how to approach negotiating an exit from her job because she has worked at this company since she graduated as it is. Comparatively speaking, a company that treats employees pretty well. The pandemic has been real curveball because things you could take care of for granted in the past, like traveling home to see your family, have gone out of the window. Completely agree. I completely agree about that because, I mean, being in the US, going to Mexico is considered relatively simple. If you had the money to take an international flight, it's relatively simple. But with the pandemic, it just amplified. I mean, it didn't matter how close you were, you're not able to travel. And it aggravated things like feeling lonely and not being able to see your family. Going back to the comment, but we've always known that she could lose her job at any time, and that's the end for us. So we've always bought cheap furniture not worth moving with us, and that we didn't mind parting with for a few dollars. Try not to have too many unnecessary possessions, maintain and build contacts back home so we wouldn't be returning with no job, network, etc. I guess we've just generally rolled with it, accepting it as very privileged adventure and doing the usual hope for the best, plan for the worst. And with you on the couch, though, with the current lockdown I'm under, there is a very real chance we'll move before it ends, and we won't be able to sell any of the furniture because we're restricted to 5K from home, and traveling to buy goods is not valid reasons to go beyond a radius. So every time I sit on the couch, I think I probably won't even get $50 for these to our moving expenses. Yeah, so this pretty much covers the amount of time I want to use covering this topic on Reddit. I talk about my experience and I read some of the stories. There's definitely some very interested insight from other people on this comment. Really interesting to see other perspective. How, for example, the Lazy Marketing 3255, the original post for this subreddit, have a very similar feeling to to my experience, even though we move from different countries and I'm sure we have different situations. Very similar feeling. And in my experience, the fact that I'm on a work-related or work-dependent visa and being in the US and with the lockdown because of COVID and such, it amplifies things. It amplifies things by a lot. Especially the pressure or the feeling of if everything goes south, what am I going to do? I'm going to get rid of things and just go south of the border with just my clothing and just sell everything here. What am I going to do? Not being able to travel, see your family, and just knowing that you have to be the best in your work every time, and doesn't matter how much work you have to do it. It's really stressful. In my experience, I have been very fortunate. I have very supporting team. My manager, the company I work for, has been very supportive. But it's really hard come on clean and open up to say, yeah, I'm feeling like crap because this is the type of pressure that I'm feeling, and it's related more to being an expat than the work pressure. Work related, it's all great. I mean, yeah, it is stressful. Yeah, there's a lot of work, and I've been taking up some extra work because, well, if you're in the industry of manufacturing or purchasing or buying stuff, supply chain, anything related to moving stuff from point A to point B in COVID times, you know how crazy the market is right now. And you've seen the news probably how there's a bunch of shortages. Well, I don't have to tell you much that it's been crazy. It's been a crazy year. And not only we have tons of work, we also have very challenging situations because of the shortages. And so I can't complain work-wise. I have a great team. I have a really good manager. The company is very stable, but there are some pressure, some things more personally that you cannot just go to your manager and start crying and say, oh, I feel lonely because I can go see my family. Maybe I can, but it's not really appropriate. And I try to convey some of those feelings and say, yeah, I want to go back to Mexico. How open are you about me working remote? And that's a different topic, but there's only so much the company can do for you on those personal topics. So unfortunately, that's the way it is. And they can only help so much. And so far I can't complain, but yeah, there are these situations where you create yourself. And if any of you have a similar experience and know how to cope with it without feeling like crap when you think about it, without feeling super stressed out about it, let me know, because I'll be happy to know about, because it's really tough dealing with those thoughts, because in the end, they're just things you have in your mind, and in the end, everything will be all right. But it's really hard to sell that to your mind when you're going down that rabbit hole, just being tough on yourself. Yeah, and with that, I want to wrap it up today. That's this episode where I cover some of the interesting things that I saw on Reddit from the expat community. Let me know what you think about this format. I'll be more than happy to know if you like it and you want me to do more of it. I like it because I get to cover other a wide variety of experiences or thoughts from people that I don't really know, but I get to bring this a more enriched content to you. So please, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the like button, subscribe, share it with your friends if you like it, and let me know in the comment section what you think of this format that I'm experimenting with. If there's any topic you want me to talk about, let me know. Or if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple iTunes, whatever other podcast platform that is your favorite, please download the show so that I can see that in the listenings rankings. And if you feel like, please go over my social media and follow me. I don't post a lot there right now, but eventually I'll try to come up with more content ideas to post over there on Instagram and Facebook. But you can use those social medias to reach out to me and send me a message about something that you might want me to cover, or a topic you want me to talk about. Or if you want to be on the podcast talking about your experience, we can do that for sure. Anyway, so that's it for today. I hope you like the content, and let me know what you think, like I just said before. So yeah, we'll talk about later. Bye.